went in there and I wasn't intending on coming out by myself. If I was coming out, it'd be with that child, me dead or alive, but that child alive. That was that was the goal.
I wanted to deliver that warmth and that comfort and something that says, I put love and time and effort into this because I care about you, even though I don't know you.
I think what he did is we make the road by walking it. And he really created this pathway for just thousands and thousands of people around the world that are walking the path that he embodied so well.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crazy Good Turns, the podcast that recognizes and celebrates people who do great things for others. I'm your host, Frank Blake. And in this episode, our last of 2022, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to tell a few shorter stories that captured our attention during the year, each a crazy good turn in itself. And we're also going to do a segment honoring the life of Dr. Paul Farmer. Dr. Farmer sadly died this year, but what an extraordinary life he lived, truly giving to others in some of the most difficult circumstances imaginable. So we think it appropriate to end the year with a tribute to him. But before we get to that and the shorter stories, I want to thank all of our listeners. Thank you all for listening to this podcast. And I want to thank all our guests on this year's podcast. I'm biased, of course, but I think we had truly, truly outstanding guests. We on the Crazy Good Turns team, Brian Sabin, Megan Hanlon, Leslie Nunn, and myself, we picked some of our favorite quotes from the episodes. And you'll find our selections on our website, crazygoodturns.org. I'll give you a preview of my favorite. I have a few others that are in the top 5, but my very favorite is from Bernie Marcus. Bernie, of course, is the founder of the Home Depot, one of the great business leaders of our country, as well as one of the great philanthropists. And it was truly an honor for me. I mean, one of the great honors of my life to be able to interview Bernie about his new book, Kicking Up Some Dust. And we had former Home Depot and some current Home Depot associates ask Bernie questions. And one of the questions he was asked was, what is he proudest of? And his answer was both pure Bernie and also, I think, really important and stuck with me. His answer was, he's proudest of the people at Home Depot. Quote, people who give with their heart, caring about other people, worrying about other people, helping other people, close quote. That's the culture that Bernie, Arthur Blank, and Ken Langone, the founders of Home Depot, established at the company. It's a culture that continues to this day, and I reflect on that quote as a great example of who Bernie is and the brilliance of what he created. Now let's get to the stories of some individuals who inspired us over this past year with acts of great bravery or kindness. And we're going to begin the segments with Nick Bostic, a pizza delivery man who became a hero overnight when he veered off his route to rush inside a burning building and lead 5 children to safety. Then we'll talk about Josh Hyman and Tammy Phipps, 2 veterans who are helping thousands of military service members and civilians cope with serious injuries and mobility challenges. Their organization, the Drivers Rehab Center of Excellence, unlocks greater freedom for these individuals and empowers them to drive. We'll hear from Kenzie Jones, an elementary school teacher who turned a class writing project into life-saving advocacy on behalf of nearly 24 shelter animals. Really an amazing story of a teacher and her class making a difference in this world. And we'll hear from Rhiannon Men, a mom who felt compelled to cook for anyone who needed it, and in the process, wound up launching an organization that's fed more than 1 million Americans and counting. And finally, as I mentioned, we'll do a segment that honors the life of Dr. Paul Farmer. Many of you know Dr. Farmer, for instance, from his past appearances on this show or the 2017 documentary, Bending the Arc. He was a force in bringing better medicine to developing nations through the global organization that he founded, Partners in Health. And later in this show, you'll hear about Dr. Farmer's life and his legacy from Dr. Sri Shamashunda, who's an inspiring person in his own right, and he carries on doing Dr. Farmer's work today. First up, let's bring you Nick Bostic. Just after midnight on July 11, Nick was driving in Lafayette, Indiana, when he saw flames leaping out from a house nearby. Minutes later, here is what happened.
Are you Xavion? Thanks, everybody. Get out. Need medic. I need oxygen.
That's the sound of Nick carrying 6-year-old Kaylani Barrett to members of the Lafayette Fire Department who were on the scene. He spoke with me about what happened, and here is his story.
I went out for a drive that night, and on my way back home, I seen the house was on fire. I only seen flames. I only seen a single flame that was like 3 foot tall and maybe like 2 feet wide.
And so you said, I got to do something. Were there people calling out to you? Did you know that there was anyone inside the house?
No, I just took a shot in the dark. When I went around the side of the house and I went to the back door and opened it.
Could I pause you just there? Because I think a lot of us, a lot of the audience listening might go, gee, if I went to the side of the house and yelled in and no one responded, I might be inclined to say, oh, okay, no one's there. And
yeah, that ran through my mind.
But you didn't. You kept on going.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to know for sure that it was safe, until I felt like I couldn't stay in there no more.
So inside there were 5 kids, and you
4 kids and one 18-year-old. Yeah, the 18-year-old had scooped up the baby, the 2-year-old already, and then the 2 14-year-olds were all upstairs. They were all in the same room already. So they came out all at the same time out that door, out of their bedroom. I was doing like a windmill, like strumming guitar, your air guitar kind of look.
Yeah.
Like you need to get out, your house is on fire.
And then you had to go back for the 6-year-old.
I had to go back for the 6-year-old. I went in there and I wasn't intending on coming out by myself. If I was coming out, it'd be with that child. Me dead or alive, but that child alive. That was that was the goal. If she wouldn't have been crying out, I wouldn't have found her. And I don't think I would be alive either. I found her pretty quick. She was just right around the corner at the bottom of the stairs, maybe like 4 feet out. I could just see the light from the lights in the stairway going up the staircase.
You found her, and now you have to get out of the house. What was the escape route out of the house?
I'd seen a window in like the first room, one of the rooms I'd looked in the bedrooms in it. I knew it was on a side that didn't have the fire started on it. But when I got to that window and we were getting out, I was punching it out. There was fire blowing from the wind. The flames were going across the window from one side to the other.
So you broke the window and then you had to jump out of it?
Yeah, I jumped out of it. I wasn't sure how I jumped out of it, but the neighbor across the road informed me that I went shoulders first.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's video showing you running from this burning house with the child, with the 6-year-old, kind of carrying her like a football. Did you know she was fine? Were you worried?
I was worried. I didn't ever have no time to check if she was all right. My 100% concern was the child. So that's why I took the whole impact. I made sure that I was the cushion that she landed on. So I didn't care what happened to me.
How long were you hospitalized?
I only let them keep me there for 2 days before I was trying to get out. I don't like staying in hospitals. I got stuff to do.
Nick, it's a great inspiration. I mean, it really is. You've set an inspiration for a lot of people, and you're very humble about it. It's easy to say, yeah, it was just a matter of doing the right thing. But I gotta say, there aren't many people, I think, who would just by instinct run into a burning building. So that's pretty extraordinary.
Thank you, sir.
Nick's example is indeed incredible. But you don't have to leap from a burning building to be a hero. In fact, a group of second graders recently learned that they too can save lives, maybe in a less dramatic way. They were armed with nothing more than their pencils. There are at least 4 million shelter animals in need of adoption each year, according to estimates. This past winter, teacher Kinsey Jones and her students gave some of those animals a voice to help them find a good home. Here, Kinsey shares the story of how a clever idea turned into a life-saving campaign for 24 dogs and cats.
I currently have 3 rescue dogs and 1 rescue cat. I also have 2 reading tortoises that I have in my classroom that the children read to every Friday. The dogs all have special needs, as does the cat. I'm kind of a sucker for helping the ones that seem the most needy. I have 2 dogs that each have 3 legs, and then 1 dog who unfortunately spent the first year of her life tethered to a tree and abused. So we have welcomed those 3 into our home. The joke is that we have 3 dogs, but they only have 10 legs.
Late one evening, Kenzie was thinking through her lesson plans when an idea struck. The idea: what if her students wrote letters on behalf of shelter animals to help them get rescued?
I stayed awake all night. I sent an email to Christy Peters, who is the director of Richmond Animal Care and Control, to tell her about my idea. And I remember mentioning in that email, you may think I'm crazy, but hear me out. Would you all be willing to do this? And she said yes, thankfully. Christy brought in an adoptable puppy from the shelter and spoke to the children outside at our school about Richmond Animal Care and Control and talked about what they do for our community and why communities need animal shelters so that the children would fully understand their task. After that, we took a virtual tour using social media outlets to see the inside of the shelter, to meet the puppies and dogs, and 1 cat that the children would be writing about.
Kenzie's students wrote letters and drew pictures of the animals. The kids tried to channel the dogs' personalities. And here's Kenzie reading a sample letter.
This is about a dog named Famous Amos. And it says, I like this one because there are a lot of questions in it. Hi, I'm Famous Amos. Please, please, please adopt me. I love belly rubs. I'm a very cute dog. Don't you love my name? Am I a very cute dog? Because I think I am. Do you love me? I hope you do, because then you can adopt me. I love you too. Take care of me and take me to a good home.
The kids in Kenzie's class actually worried about whether their letters would be good enough. Each day they asked for updates, wondering whether their animal had been placed.
I did hear from many of them that they didn't think it would work, that they didn't think they could write letters and actually get an animal adopted. So when it really did happen, when the animals started going home one by one, quickly, day after day, they became extremely proud of themselves. By the end of May, every single one of the animals had found a forever home.
Kenzie says she plans to repeat the project again with her new class this year, and she's heard from other teachers around the country who'd like to do the same.
Other teachers have emailed me. There is a man who lives, I think, in Williamsburg, who actually created a Facebook page about this project for teachers to look at. And I sent him a quick lesson plan of what I did so that other teachers can grab it and go with the idea. I'm hoping it will catch on everywhere.
If the idea does spread, it could help a lot of animals find a place to call home. And Kenzie says children learn an extremely valuable lesson in the process.
I learned that kids have the power to change their community. And I think deep down I knew that, but then actually seeing this happen really meant a lot to me, that I could show them through their actions that they actually did make an impact in their community.
For anyone interested in setting up a letter writing campaign with their local animal shelter, we'll have a link to the resources Kenji mentioned on our website. You'll find them at crazygoodturns.org/heroes 2022. Now, we'd like to ask you a question. What would your life be like if you couldn't drive? Try and imagine it for a moment. Most of us depend on our cars to get to work, to get our kids to school, or to get food from the store. Right now, there are tens of thousands who are unable to drive because of injuries, diseases, or other issues. Josh Hyman understands this issue all too well. In 2009, he was serving with the U.S. Marines in Iraq when an explosion left him gravely wounded and unable to walk. His recovery took years, including nearly a half a dozen before he could return to driving. That's why his new mission is to bring the gift of mobility to those thousands of Americans, military and civilian alike, who face mobility challenges. To do it, he teamed up with a person who helped him return to the road, fellow veteran Tammy Phipps. In our next segment, Josh and Tammy share their story.
I live about 20 minutes from the Pentagon, and during my senior year of high school, we experienced 9/11. So 9/11 was a pretty traumatic experience for me, and I felt a calling to join the Marine Corps. And during my deployment, we rolled over an IED, and I was ejected from the vehicle, and I sustained multiple spinal cord injuries. And as bad as my injuries were, I always have to remember that there were 14 men in my battalion that gave their life. So before I start feeling sorry about myself, I can always remember them, and they're really the true heroes.
Josh spent months recovering from his injuries, which left him paralyzed from the chest down. While recovering at Walter Reed, he met rehabilitation therapist Tammy Phipps.
From injury to driving independent, it was almost 4 years for Josh. And to give you an idea of how efficient this process can be, as long as you have all the pieces, parts, funding, etc., Josh really should have been driving certainly within the first year and been able to do that independently.
Tammy developed the very first return to driving program for the Department of Defense. While at Walter Reed, she served more than 400 soldiers, and she saw firsthand how people who aren't given the right resources take on unnecessary risks.
When I started at Walter Reed in 2008, at Walter Reed, we would have amputees sharing the primary controls. So one amputee on the floor doing gas and brake and one doing steering. I promise you it happened. I could tell you more crazy stories, but why did they do that? Because they wanted to get off base, because they wanted to live their life. They wanted to participate in whatever was happening in the community, and so they just did it.
Tammy made improvements to the driving program to make it faster and more efficient, and she realized that she could help even more people as a civilian.
When the wars died down, she had, she talked to me and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about a private practice." And I said, we were really blessed to have her during the time of us, combat injured veterans. But I knew that there were so many more people out there. There was tons of quadriplegics and people that my condition and worse. They really needed the services that she could provide. Basically, we got together and I was like, you know what? I don't think me giving you tips is going to be enough. I probably need to become a partner in this because that's kind of the time commitment.
When we opened business, we're in Chantilly, Virginia, which is Northern Virginia, so the DC metro area. We had no idea how many people, but we have seen in the last 6 years coming up on around 2,000 people. We work with anyone who has a disability or medical diagnosis that could impair driving, from the beginning of driving age, so age 14, all the way to retirement from driving, whatever that looks like towards our later years in life.
We should have a DRC in every major city in America. I mean, that's pretty much what's needed.
Today, the Driver Rehabilitation Center of Excellence is expanding. They recently opened a center in Columbus, Ohio, and they continue to serve both civilians and soldiers.
A quick example, I had a lieutenant that was injured 10 years ago, lost both of his legs in Afghanistan and from Wisconsin, and he's been driving with a broomstick. A military nonprofit organization got him in contact with us. We flew him out from Wisconsin, kept him here for 3 or 4 days, and then from that point, we were able to put the entire project together for him.
When a person comes under, DRCE, they know they're going to get taken care of from the beginning to the end. Our goal is not to just say you can drive again; it's to actually go through and get you back driving. I'm a very, very lucky guy to be alive. I really wanted to help this business in honor of the 14 men that gave their lives during our mission over there. I hope they're proud looking down.
For more on Josh, Tammy, and the Drivers Rehabilitation Center of Excellence, visit www.driverrehabcenter.com. That's www.driverrehabcenter.com. In our next segment, we'd like to introduce you to Rhiannon Men. Rhiannon is a mom who, like so many of us, felt frustrated and helpless during the COVID-19 pandemic. With the disease and the lockdowns that followed, what could one person do to make a difference? For Rhiannon, the answer was she could cook. Knowing that people in her community were stressed and stretched thin with working from home and homeschooling kids, she decided to make lasagnas for anyone who needed them, for any reason at all. The idea took off, and soon others wanted to help. Today, her organization, Lasagna Love, is responsible for more than 250,000 meals made and more than 1 million Americans fed. Here is her story in her own words.
I'm Rhiannon Men. I'm the founder of Lasagna Love. So we have volunteers who love to cook, and we have recipients all over the country who will sign up for any number of reasons because they could use some kindness in their life. And they'll get matched with a local volunteer who will deliver a home-cooked meal, usually lasagna, to their doorstep, no questions asked.
Rhiannon says the idea for Lasagna Love came to her during the pandemic. When the lockdown started and people were isolated, she wanted to help, but didn't know how.
I felt incredibly helpless, and I was looking around in my community for volunteer opportunities, and we were living in San Diego at the time, and everything shut down. And so we had 2 little kids to entertain, and I love cooking. It's what gives me energy and happiness, and I love sharing food with people, and I just decided that I was going to start making meals and finding people in the community who could use them for whatever reason that might be.
It started with just a couple of lasagnas, then a couple more. She let people know the food was available on social media, and soon others took interest.
I never actually looked for volunteers. When I posted, I looked for families that needed the help. And then a few weeks in, I started getting messages from mostly moms, because I was posting in moms groups saying, I don't need a meal, but I would love to cook if there are enough families to go around. And so I just said, why not? Sure, like anything's possible.
She kept track of cooks and deliveries with a spreadsheet, one that just kept getting bigger and bigger.
I got emails saying, hey, could I start this in Northern California? Could I start it in Iowa and Texas and Florida? And I just always said yes and figured it out as we went. I think there's a moment when I realized that this was more than just me and a group of people making lasagnas occasionally. I think that was September of 2020 when we were blessed to be invited to be on the Today Show. And within a month, we had gone from 500 volunteers to 5,000.
Rhiannon says her organization has delivered more than 250,000 lasagnas to date, feeding more than 1 million Americans. She says there's something special about the dish. Well, I don't know. Maybe there's something special about her.
I could have chosen any kind of meal. To me, lasagna really communicates this feeling of of love and comfort. It's the comfort meal you bring to somebody when they've had a baby, when they've lost somebody they love, when they're going through something. Lasagna just kind of makes sense. It's cheesy, it's warm, it's delicious. And I really wanted to deliver more than just a meal to these families that I was helping. I wanted to deliver that warmth and that comfort and something that says, I put love and time and effort into this because I care about you, even though I don't know you. And here it is. If you like to cook and want to get involved with her organization, Lasagna Love, go to www.lasagnalove.org. That's www.lasagnalove.org. Finally, I'd like to close with a reflection on the life and work of Dr. Paul Farmer. It absolutely is not an overstatement to say that Dr. Farmer changed global healthcare. Beginning as a medical student volunteering in Haiti, he went on to found Partners in Health, which today employs more than 18,000 health professionals working to improve the quality of healthcare around the globe. In fact, in some of the most difficult places on this earth. Dr. Farmer died this past year. On February 21st, while working at the University of Global Health Equity in Rwanda, he passed away in his sleep. Our next guest, Sri Shamasunda, was with Dr. Farmer in Rwanda just a week before he died. Sri sat down with us to tell us about what it was like to spend time with Dr. Farmer and how his legacy will continue to shape healthcare for generations to come. I was in undergrad in the late 90s, early 2000s, and Paul Farmer, as some of your audience might know, had a book written on him in 2003 called Mountains Beyond Mountains that really catapulted him to, very well-known status, especially in global health. But at that time, in 1998, 1999, he was under 40. He was this doctor that was splitting his time between Boston and Haiti, and he was spending a lot of time taking care of very poor populations in Haiti, and he would come speak. And so I remember sitting in that church, in 1998 or 99, and he just had such a clear moral vision of what he was trying to do, and you could see the joy and the purpose. I think when you were in his presence and the work that he was doing, there was this sense that you wouldn't want to do anything else in the world. Like, what possibly else could be more important than taking care of poor patients, advocating with them, alongside them, accompanying them? There was a sense that this is the place that you want to be in the world. And I think Paul Farmer embodied that.
For our listeners, they should know that Sri is also inspires the same feelings on others, because we came in contact with a mutual friend who just said, you've got to meet Sri, one of the most inspirational, amazing people in the world. And how do you see what you're doing is continuing his legacy, building off of his legacy? How do you see that?
I think, if you follow the trajectory of Paul Farmer as an academic, a scholar, as an activist, as a physician, he published so much during his life, and he was such a scholar. So in some ways, the path forward for a lot of us is written down, which I think is a huge boon for us. And he always said, the conversation, cost effectiveness, too expensive. It should be the beginning of a conversation and not the end of a conversation. So some of this just saying what is normal at this moment and what we should not get used to. What are the outcomes and the suffering and the stupid deaths? He used to call them stupid deaths, where we know the cure, we know the treatment, but because we lack the collective commitment and power, and our institutions are failing us, that we accept the death from HIV or TB. And so I think what Paul Farmer's, one of his legacies and as a physician, is all the things that our eyes get used to, his eyes would not get used to, and would say that this is an unacceptable outcome.
And as you look out towards the future, and obviously a future without Paul, do your thoughts tend towards optimism? Do your thoughts tend towards, oh my gosh, I don't know if we can ever get to the point where we need to be on providing healthcare to our world's poorest? How do you look at that?
I think what he did is like, we make the road by walking it. And he really created this pathway for just thousands and thousands of people around the world that are walking the path that he embodied so well. And so I think it's this conversation about global health, around health equity. He was doing it in Rwanda when, the last week that I spent with him at the end of his life, there's this phenomenal university with a cohort of Rwandan medical students whose parents have lived through the genocide that are having a free medical education. And I spent a week teaching them, and they are as brilliant as any students I've come across from UCSF to Harvard. And they're going to be the next group of people taking care of very poor patients in Rwanda. And he helped support that. It was his vision to create a world-class university in rural Rwanda. And so I think from Boston to San Francisco to Rwanda to Mexico, there's just legions of us that are kind of walking the walk that he did. And so that encourages me.
Sri, I can't thank you enough for giving us, our listeners, some of your wisdom. Also can't thank you enough for what you do every day, helping those who really need medical assistance, and just, as you said about Paul Farmer, the openness of your heart and the purity of your purpose. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for this podcast that elevates all of these voices.
I hope you enjoyed listening to these stories and the reflection on Dr. Farmer's life. This has been, like every year, an extraordinary year. And I want to thank all of you, our listeners, for taking the time, your precious time, to listen to this podcast. I think it is, in its way, its own crazy good turn for you to take the time in your way to recognize and celebrate people who do wonderful things for others. So I thank all of our guests this year, and I thank all of you, our listeners. And of course, I always want to thank the production team at Crazy Good Turns who make all of this possible. That's Brian Sabin, our producer, Megan Hanlon, our associate producer, Leslie Nunn, who keeps everything going, Stephen Key, who makes this sound better than it should, and Score, who does the same. I wish all of you a wonderful Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and I hope you'll tune in again in 2023. Thank you.